If you're considering whether or not you should hang on to your property and keep it as a rental versus sell it, then there are really three main variables that my team and I recommend that you consider as you make that decision. And when you really factor in all three variables, oftentimes people get surprised by the result. When they really look at the math, they're surprised, like they thought they should keep the property and they shouldn't, or vice versa. And so it's really helpful to consider the whole picture as you make that decision. If you find yourself in this situation, I've got some great tips for you here in this video, but also we do have a free rent versus sell equity calculator that I would be happy to run for you. It's a full spreadsheet that weighs out your options, whether you should rent or sell versus putting money in something like the S&P 500 and an index fund at 10%. And we run those for you at like 3, 5, and 10-year scenarios. So you can get a sense for would I be better off selling now or in 3 or 5 or 10 years, and we'll weigh those out against each other. So if you're interested in that, reach out, just pop a comment below, or you can shoot us an email at contact@gluchgroup.com, and we'd be happy to set that up for you. If you're considering whether or not you should hang on to your property and keep it as a rental versus sell it, then there are really three main variables that my team and I recommend that you consider as you make that decision. And when you really factor in all three variables, oftentimes people get surprised by the result. When they really look at the math, they're surprised, like they thought they should keep the property and they shouldn't, or vice versa. And so it's really helpful to consider the whole picture as you make that decision. Hey, my name is John Gluch, and I'm the team leader of the Gluch Group. And my team and I, for 25 years now, have been helping people make decisions just like this. Does it make more sense to hang on to that property or to sell it? So let me walk you through some great ways to actually think about that and make a fantastic decision. The first thing to consider is pretty simple: cash flow, right? Does the property bring in more money than it costs? And it's pretty simple to figure that out. And it's an important variable, but it's not the only one. The second variable is neighborhood trajectory. Is the property getting more valuable or less valuable? And that really varies a ton. There's certain parts of the valley where properties are doing great, appreciation's fantastic, and that property will almost certainly be worth more a year from now than it is today. But there's definitely parts of town, lots of parts of town, where properties are losing value. And it's not, a little bit, it's a significant amount of money that people are losing every single year that they hold onto that property. And so the trajectory of your neighborhood is a significant factor as well. The third variable that's often overlooked is opportunity cost. So if you sold the property, assuming you have equity, what would you do with that money? Where could you put it? Could you go find another place to make more money? Like the stock market's been doing pretty good lately. All this AI stuff seems to be working in terms of stock value, or maybe opportunity cost in terms of just lifestyle. Maybe you want to take that money, use it for the next house you want to buy. Maybe you want to buy a boat, whatever it is. That's an opportunity cost too. And so that's the third variable that we really want to consider as we figure out what the best decision is. All right, so let's look at the first variable, which is just cash flow. That's pretty simple. If you're not aware of what your home could rent for, you could do some simple research online, throw it into some AI bot or Google, and you can probably get some rough estimates, or we've got a great property management partner who can look at comps for you free of charge to give you like an exact number of what your home would rent for. But obviously the income less the expenses is going to be your cash flow. The things that people sometimes overlook though is vacancy. So we tend to factor in about 8% for vacancy, just because there's a chance that the home isn't going to be rented all the time. And then another 8% for stuff going wrong, things breaking, that kind of stuff. So important to factor those things in, as well as a property management fee, HOA, etc., anything that's going to have a cost related to it. And that's your cash flow number. Either you're making money or you're losing money every month. And if you're losing money, obviously that's got to work for you, right? You've got to be able to have the cash flow to cover that negative, that loss every single month. And if you are losing money and you don't have equity, then hang on till the end of the video. I'm going to walk you through a couple different options. If you're in a spot where you're really kind of underwater on this house, you do have some choices. But that's really the first factor in figuring it out, is that cash flow. All right, the second variable is neighborhood trajectory or appreciation. Are you losing or gaining money? And broadly speaking, reach out if you'd like to know specifically for your neighborhood. We'll give you exactly the details. But if you broadly want to know, it's generally speaking, the closer you are really to new builds. If they're building a lot of properties near you, you're probably losing equity. The problem is there's just so much competition. The builders can keep building houses and they can do it cheaply. So you're competing against new builds. So if you're in the outskirts of town, Queen Creek or Goodyear, Casa Grande or Buckeye, you're probably losing money. Every zip code is different. And so again, we can really track that down for you. And some neighborhoods are doing better than others. But the further outside you are of the metro area, probably the worse you are. If you're closer to town, Phoenix, Mesa, Tempe, Scottsdale's doing really well, Paradise Valley, especially luxury markets are doing very well because the stock market is doing very well. Luxury home market pricing tends to follow what's happening with the stock market, then you're probably doing pretty good. So if you're in one of those neighborhoods where you're losing money every month, that's a significant part of the equation. Is the reality is you are probably years away from making money in terms of appreciation on the house. So if you're losing money monthly in terms of cash flow and you're losing equity, then it's very likely that you're going to be better off selling, even if it's a tough pill to swallow, even if it's not the number you want, even if you're losing money, you're having to write a check or you're having to short sell the property, still might be better off than hanging on to it as a rental, even though that is no fun to deal with. Now, if you're in a different situation where you're in a great appreciating market, maybe you're cash flowing, then obviously you're in a much better spot to hang on to that property as a rental. So appreciation is a big factor and really important for you to consider in this equation. All right, the third factor is opportunity cost. What could you do with the money? So is there something fun you'd love to do with the money? You want to go on a trip, whatever it is, great, that matters. Your life's important. It's not just about the money. But if we're talking in terms of numbers, then what could you do with that cash? You could put it in something like an S&P index fund or the Dow. Those indexes have done really, really well the last, bunch of years. And everyone seems to have a pretty optimistic view of what's going to go on with the market. So what we do in our calculator that we run for people is we typically put in 10%. That's a pretty conservative number. Oftentimes people can beat that. But if you're in a position where you've got a lot of equity, so let's say you've owned the rental for 20 years and you've kind of paid most of it down. Even if your cash flow is fantastic because you got a really low interest rate, but you don't owe much on the property, it's a reasonable chance that you putting that money in something else might end up better, especially if you're not in an area of town that's already appreciating at, 5, 6, 7% or more. If you're in an area of town that's appreciating at 3% or 2, or maybe even losing money, then you're certainly going to be better off taking that equity out, putting into the investment that's going to end up doing better for you. The people who end up typically making more sense to hold on to the property is they've got a low interest rate and a moderate to a low amount of equity. So selling the property is not going to get you tons of cash that you can go put some other place and make a bunch of money, and you're cash flowing okay because you got a 3% interest rate however many years ago. So people in that spot, so if that's you, doing okay on equity but not great and pretty good interest rate, those numbers are typically going to end up being, hey, hang on, rent this out. That's probably going to pencil out better. But people with very high interest rates and low cash flow, or with very large amounts of equity, oftentimes the opportunity cost is just too great. It just makes too much sense to sell that property, get that cash out, and go use it somewhere else. So let's say in a position where you are underwater, you are either at zero equity or you're gonna have to write a check to sell the house. This is an unfortunate situation. And you've got really two options. One is to lose the equity you put. Maybe you put 20% down and you're just gonna lose that after you sell the property with fees and the fact that it's lost money. You lose your down payment. That's no fun, but it is an option. You can also write a check if you don't have a lot of equity, but you've got some cash. Some people are having to write a check to sell a house. It's no fun to do that, but it is the situation we're running into now a little bit more commonly for people who bought their home in the last couple of years, especially in outlying parts of town. The third would be a short sale. So if you don't have the money and can't afford to continue to pay for this home, you can run to see if you can qualify for a short sale. And that's something we can help you figure out. We've done lots of short sales. So if that's interesting to you, let us know. Effectively, you're just walking away if you're short selling. You're not going to make the payments anymore. You're not going to write a check to sell the house. You're either going to let the bank take it in foreclosure, which is not awesome, or short sell it, which is get the bank to agree to take less than you owe on the property in exchange or as a result, you end up with a credit hit for sure, but it's a lot better than getting foreclosed on. So you do have some options. If you're upside down, you have negative equity. It's not fun options, but you do have a choice. So big picture, you're gonna find yourself in one of three spots. One would be it really, really makes sense to hang on to the property. That would be, you've got a moderate amount of equity, pretty good interest rate, you're probably going to be better off hanging on to the property. Again, send us your numbers. We're happy to run the calcs and you can see exactly what this looks like on paper. The second would be you are in a spot where it really makes sense to sell. You're in a part of town where it's losing value, losing equity. You've got some negative cash flow or barely cash flowing, and you're just kind of at this point on a sinking ship. It's not going to get better in a year. Maybe you'll get better in 5 or 10 years. I mean, that's very possible, but the next 2-3 years, probably not going to be great. So better just to take the medicine, sell the property, and move on. Third would be you're upside down. You've got negative equity, and then you've got the options I just went through, which are not fun, not pleasant, but they are options. You're not in a spot where you don't have a choice. You do have a choice, so we can help you walk through that. Happy to chat with you about that as well. As I mentioned, we have a great tool that we use to help people figure out whether they should rent or sell. We can give you specific numbers, compare it against whatever you want to compare it against, the S&P 500 or what have you, and really help you figure out the math, so you don't have to think all this through on your own. So if you'd like that, just drop a comment in the chat below, or feel free to reach out to us at contact@gluchgroup.com or 480-378-6700. And we'd be happy to set that up for you, or just talk through your options, hear you out. We have these conversations literally every single week. So it's a really common thing for us, and we'll be happy to walk you through making a great decision.